NomadCool, RV, Refrigeration, Reimagined.
Okay, so we're going to take you through the new universal PCB electronic circuit for all fridges, all domestic fridges, all European fridges. They work with two things. There's two main parts. You've got a solenoid, gas solenoid, and those guys are a bit complicated because they work on 1.5 volts. And in America they work on the American standard, which is 12 volts, and they have a different solenoid. So in Europe there's a special system. And then you have something which is like a main control board. In this case we've got a tick. This is a P board, and of course you can see how they burn out. What you have is you have corrosion from being by the sea. Mostly lots of camper vans are always sitting by the sea. So the corrosion eats away at on this particular board, you've got two problems. You've got the power from the mains going into this. You've got the power from the battery, the high current DC voltage going into the PCB for a relay. And then automatically somehow it switches with the eyebrow board, the other PCB controller. And they work out which is the best power source, of course, that you can use. Now, something important to say, the reason why they developed the three-way system was so that when you're driving, you can have the fridge cold, but it's a complete, real fabrication on reality, if you think about it. They only keep the fridge just cold. They don't actually make the fridge go colder, or anyway, you can't use them to make the fridge cold. And the problem is that it goes straight into the battery of the car. So if you're driving along and you get halfway and your battery's a bit flat and your power steering starts going down and you've got the fridge on, it might be that. It might be that your battery's not so good, your alternator's not producing enough power, and you've got a kettle on in the back. Because that's what you've got inside these fridges, is basically a kettle. And the kettle, burner, is on all the time running from your car battery. So you're driving along, all of a sudden power steering starts going funny, brakes don't work, hydraulic brakes don't work, lights start going out. Oh, your car's basically out of control. There's no security in there at all to stop that from happening. And then the car runs out of battery, you're pulling over, hopefully, all safe. And then you found out that your alternator wasn't working properly, your car battery isn't charging properly, and you had your fridge on. So that's the last time you're ever going to do that. You're never going to do that again. So this three-way thing was a complete joke, a designer's gimmick to sell something which wasn't really a fair description of a three-way system. Anyway, we can talk about that more later. This is another type of problem when you get the board blow up and they just blow, and when they go, they go. Obviously, that's a fire hazard, another problem. Putting all of your power sources into one board is another design fault, really, you could say. You don't really want to have high current DC voltage going directly into the same power supply board, which is going to run your gas line, which has got high voltage. We've got 2,500 volts being generated inside this guy, and with sparks generating and click and all this, and then a gas solenoid and a fire hazard. I mean, that's obviously not good. So what we're going to do, we're going to just turn this off. I'll show you how it works, right? So we've got a switch on the outside here, which is obviously easy for access. We're going to turn it off. We're going to turn it back on again. And that is just now replacing the eyebrow board. The eyebrow board normally is on the front of the fridge, or at the top of the fridge. And that board basically has a lot of functionality which you don't really need. With a fridge, just like the old days, all you need is an on button and an off button, if at all. Most fridges don't even have that. You just plug them in and they work, right? That's all you need. You need the fridge just to work, right? So that's what that does. It turns it on. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just do that one more time. You're going to listen. So we're going to listen in the back here. And what we've got here, I'll turn it on, is you've got a 40-second or a few seconds delay. And then you can hear the power supply kick in. It does its testing and its checking. And what we say here is this is a universal setup here. You've got a special power supply here. You've got your controller board there. And it's just wired in. So what you need, once you have a fire and all your connectors are all burnt out, you need to rewire it completely into the system. There's no way to reconnect all those kind of cables and stuff like that. So everything goes into this box, it all gets rewired, you get rid of all of the old connectors and you just wire it up. And this is a gas only system with a mains only system. There's no more freeway, it's a two-way. Which is two-way, the logical two-way, which is, you know, if you have electric supply, it automatically goes onto the electric, but that doesn't go through the board. And if you have gas, you just turn it on by your gas and it works automatically. And there's not much more to it. In Europe, we have a standard. That standard is a special ISO standard, and we're not allowed to use 12 volts on these solenoids, so they work on 1.5 volts, and here we have a digital control board which outputs 1.5 volts, exactly what's needed for the solenoid in Europe. So on a European standard, that's how that works. And the rest of it, this whole system is installed for about 130 euros. Now in comparison, you're talking about this board, if you buy that, it's going to cost you 250. The eyebrow board is going to cost you something like 150, and by the time you've put it in and installed it all, you're probably talking about 500 bucks at minimum, and that's if they haven't changed the solenoid or anything else, or the fans, or anything else is broken. And of course, these fridges, they last about 15 years. So once you've got an absorption fridge on its last legs, maybe on its last, 2 or 3 years of life, maybe you're about 10 years down the line, you're going to start getting all these problems, one thing after another. The solenoids are going to break, the PCBs are going to start going, the control boards are going to go, one thing or another. And of course, if you're spending a lot of money, 500 euros here, 500 euros here, there it goes quickly. If you're on the road and you're desperate, you're on holiday and you need the fridge work and you can't stop your holiday for that, you're going to pay through the nose for a last minute repair. Anyway, you don't really want to be spending 500 euros for a new control board, especially if you can get them installed, universal ones, right, which can work on any fridges, for, best part of 150 bucks, and you're probably back on the road. And that's the universal kit that we sell and we offer. Realistically though, these fridges, they don't go more than around about 15 years at very best. That's if you keep them level all the time. That's if you don't leave them off for a long period of time. If you leave them off for a long period of time, let's say you don't use the fridge for about 6 months, you're going to come back and that fridge is not going to work. The crystals in the ammonia, they crystallize and it blocks the fridge, the compartments, and it just doesn't pass that circle anymore. And when that happens, you hear this kind of old hack that you can take the fridge out and turn it upside down. Everyone's heard that. That's for these types of fridges. If you get that crystallization where you haven't used it for a few months and it's basically crystallized. So that's one of the big problems that people don't realize. And the other one is obviously when they're not level. When they're not level, what happens is the burner, it doesn't burn straight, so it burns through the metal, and the metal joins the gas burner part, joins the ammonia part. And of course, if you get the angle slightly wrong, it will burn through that and it will corrode. And it always corrodes just at that point there, and that's where they always break. And when they break, they're done. There's nothing more you can do with that fridge. And these fridges are around about 3,000 euros, right, to replace. If you're going to replace a new fridge right now with another absorption fridge, you're probably thinking to yourself, isn't there another option? Is that the best thing? Why can't I use a fridge, a normal fridge, a domestic fridge, or and run it off solar? And that's what people are doing now. The big trend is going through to solar because the price of lithium has come right down. You can get 300 amp hours of lithium for around about 500 euros, probably even cheaper, depends on the brand. But for 500 euros, you've got your power supply, you've got your battery, that's going to last you best part of 7 days. It's not like you're not going to have sun for 7 days. The panels, they're quite cheap. For 300 euros, you've got your panels. For the best part of 2,000 euros, you can convert this old fridge to a solar system fridge with 2 different compressors, one working for the freezer, one working for the fridge. A much better system all over, because you can actually then turn that fridge off or the freezer off independently. You can't do that with these systems because they're all wired together. It's one system. But what we're talking about is a different type of system. It's something very similar to a company that's been around for a very long time, called Sub-Zero. They make fridges the old-fashioned way, where you have one compressor for the freezer, one independent compressor for the fridge. And of course it's gonna, you're gonna wear things down a lot less because they're running half as hard. The most important part is though, if you've ever had a frosty fridge where you've had to defrost it, and all that defrosting technology, which they have elements inside there, that all breaks all quite often because it's like having a kettle inside the fridge, which automatically goes on and off every 5 minutes to defrost the ice. The reason why they have that problem is because technically, another kind of secret of the industry, if you like, is what they're doing is keeping the freezer at any temperature below 0, and they're keeping the fridge at 7 degrees. And what's happening is that you've got the freezer is being worked too hard to maintain the fridge temperature. It doesn't matter what happens to the freezer as long as it's way low. So that all freezes up. You leave the door open, it's all going to use up more energy and it's going to freeze up. So to avoid that and to give you a bit more control, and especially when you've got not much power, if you're like off grid and you haven't got too much sun and whatever, the big concern everyone's got is, well, what happens if the sun's out and the fridge and whatever. Here in the winter, it's only the time that you're really going to worry about that. You can have just the fridge working on its own. You can turn the freezer off completely, and then you're going to be looking at 1 week of power just on one charge, on one battery charge. Now you've got 4 different ways to charge that battery. You've got the solar, you've got AC, which you can plug in anywhere you can. You've got driving the motor, which can charge it up in a couple of hours. Drive it along, it will just charge up automatically. And if not, you've got the battery itself. So you've got 4 actual ways of running this fridge, independent ways. And the difference with this idea is that you're not going to drain the power running a kettle at any time. There's no power going into this. The only power is for the battery, and it works on a different charge. It uses excess energy from the alternator, not directly taking power from the car battery. So we take the excess energy, we put it into the charger to charge the lithium battery. At no point are you discharging massive amounts of energy. It's charging with excess. So you're never going to run that risk of basically getting to the end of your destination and realizing that you can't use the van anymore, which has been the case up until now. So anyway, it's a 4-way system with 2 compressors, 2 different systems, and of course it's a lot better, a lot more efficient, and for the same price. One more thing, when you buy a domestic fridge, you go to the shop, you pick them up, touch them and move them around a little bit. If you push them, you'll realise what I'm talking about. They've got no weight in them. The insulation is, very, very thin, very, very light, not very good. Now, for a normal domestic house, it's okay. You don't need to worry about insulation too much because they're all Fs and they're all Ds and no one's looking, no one cares because power's not your issue. When they made these guys are full of insulation. You can't pick them up. They're like, you need 2 guys to pick these guys up, and you need to, when you're doing the work, you need a special crane kind of like system inside to manage the weight of them because they're actually really quite heavy. And the problem is, or the reason, it's not a problem, the good part about that is that they're full of insulation, full of heavy, good quality insulation, and the compartment that you've got to fit into will never be the same. If you're going to change your fridge over for a new fridge, it's never going to be exactly the same compartment. You're going to have a little gap on either side, and it's not going to look nice. You're going to spend a lot of time faffing around trying to make that fit, and you're going to lose all your insulation. And these fridges, after about 10 years, when they're basically dying, you don't need to change the fridge because a 10-year-old fridge looks actually really nice inside. When it's 30, 40 years old, yeah, they look a bit rough, but at 10 years, most of the people that look after these motorhomes are really looking after them in a nice way. They're pride and joy, and they look after everything. And so the fridges are in really good state. So it's kind of a big mistake to throw away that good fridge, which has got all the insulation. It's a much better idea, in our opinion, to change the compressors in the back, change the electronics, and modernise it so that it works on electric. And with today's prices, it wasn't really possible up until just now because it wasn't economically viable. But now, with the prices as they are, you can do it for cheaper than buying a new fridge. And the last thing I'll say, imagine the price that you're going to run a fridge for. A gas bottle is going to last you about 2 or 3 weeks, probably about 2 weeks. They're going to cost you about 30 bucks, 30 euros for a gas bottle. That's 60 euros a month, right? That's probably about 600 euros a year just to run the gas. And that's without all the maintenance and cleaning the valves and whatever else, which needs doing all the time on these things. So you're paying 600 euros, right, just for energy every single year. And imagine over 10 years, that's 6K, easy, probably a little bit more. With the repairs, probably a little bit more. So you're probably looking at 8K plus the price of the fridges, which is about 3K. So it's about, we're talking best part of 10K here, just for a cold fridge for 10 years. And then you know it's going to die. So it's 1,000 per year overall. And we're talking about a kit here, it's about 2,000 euros. The whole thing is done for you, done and dusted with the solar, the battery, the compressors, and you're in for about 2,000 euros. That's game over. That's the 10-year lifespan. It will probably last you 15 years or something like that. I don't know, who knows? Probably more than that, because it's solar and it's all, life cycles are much, much higher, and there's none of this maintenance that you have to do every 5 minutes. So that's the last thing I'll say. It's a much better idea, and I'll leave it to you.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time with NomadCool.
In the circuit, feeling high, love's a neon glow. Pixels dance you